The morning sun barely touched the streets of Cincinnati when Derrick walked into the Bean Counter Cafe, the small neighborhood gem known for its rich espresso and quirky atmosphere. The soft hum of casual chatter filled the air, blending with the clinking of mugs and the sound of screens flicking on and off as people sipped their drinks and scrolled through their phones. For Derrick, it was just another Tuesday, an early meeting to prep for, but not before enjoying his ritual, a piping hot black coffee. The line was short, just a few people in front of him, and as he took his place, he pulled out his phone, already mentally piecing together the day's agenda. The door's familiar jingle barely caught his attention. Then, as if sensing a shift, he glanced up. A woman had entered, mid-40s, her features sharp, her presence impatient. She strode through the cafe like a storm, eyes scanning the room with visible annoyance, her heels tapping impatiently on the tile as she joined the line behind him. Derrick didn't think much of it. Mornings made everyone a little irritable, and caffeine deprivation often came with short fuses. But then it began, the subtle undercurrent of tension. A sharp exhale, followed by an inaudible mutter. He focused on his phone, but the next words were clear, her voice cutting through the air, unbelievable. Some people have no manners. Derrick glanced over his shoulder, uncertain if she was talking to him or just venting. Her cold, unwavering glare confirmed it was the former. Raising an eyebrow, he turned back to his phone, dismissing the small discomfort. He had seen this before, those quiet moments, filled with microaggressions, too faint to confront, yet heavy enough to cause a stir. The line moved forward, and Derrick shuffled a little closer to the counter, moving into the space in front of him. It was then that her voice sliced through the ambient noise, louder, sharper, and full of accusation. "Excuse me, you just cut in front of me," she snapped, her words carrying across the cafe, demanding attention. Derrick froze for a beat, the shock hitting him before he fully processed her words. Turning fully around, he met her gaze, his voice calm, measured, almost soothing. "I've been in line since I walked in," he said, his tone carrying no hint of conflict. Her expression twisted immediately, a scowl twisting her face as she fired back, "No, you weren't. I've been standing here, and you just pushed ahead like you own the place." The entire room felt the shift. Conversations faltered, eyes turned, and an uncomfortable hush enveloped the space. Derrick could sense the weight of the gazes on him, some curious, some unsure of how to react. Even the barista, caught in the middle, hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. Derrick stood his ground, his posture relaxed but unwavering. "I'm not sure what you're talking about, but I didn't cut in line," he said, keeping his voice steady, undisturbed. She crossed her arms, her voice rising with frustration. "Of course, you'd say that. People like you always think the rules don't apply to them." The words hung in the air, more loaded now. The room, already tense, seemed to contract further, every patron now a captive audience to the unfolding confrontation. Derrick felt the pressure, but his composure never wavered. He could hear the murmurs of onlookers and feel the pulse of anticipation. What happened next was something no one could have predicted. Derrick inhaled slowly, the calm on his face belying the storm brewing inside. He had heard this tone before, resentful, laced with entitlement, but never like this. Not here, in a cafe over something as trivial as a line. As she moved closer, invading his personal space, Derrick's body tensed. She jabbed a finger at his chest, her voice full of venom. "I know your type," she spat, each word dripping with contempt. "Always trying to take what isn't yours, cutting in line, breaking the rules, typical." The word typical hit harder than anything else she had said. It hung in the air, charged with meaning, and Derrick felt it sting deeply. He saw the couple by the window exchange nervous glances, the barista's hand hovering over the phone, ready to dial for help. Derrick remained still, the weight of the room's focus pressing down on him. But he didn't back down. His voice remained firm, yet calm. "I don't know what you mean by my type, but I'm not here to argue with you. I've been standing in line just like everyone else." For a moment, it seemed like she might reconsider, her face flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. But then, in a voice trembling with barely contained rage, she uttered the word that would change everything. "You people think you can just do whatever you want. Well, not here, not today." The word hung in the air, thick with tension. The entire cafe froze, as if the world outside had stopped turning. The sound of cups clinking against saucers broke the stillness, as everyone turned to face the confrontation. Even the woman herself seemed briefly stunned by the weight of her own words, though she quickly masked it with a defiant stare. The barista's face was one of shock, mouth agape, as if trying to figure out the right response. Derrick's chest tightened, the words cutting deeper than he expected. But he didn't flinch. Instead, he closed his eyes for a brief moment, centering himself, knowing full well that the room was waiting for his next move. The air was thick with tension, the kind of silence that weighed on every soul in the room. Then, from a nearby table, a man's voice shattered the stillness. "Hey lady, what the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded, disbelief and disgust dripping from his words. A ripple of murmurs followed, spreading like wildfire. A woman, standing just a few feet away, chimed in, her voice sharp with agreement. "Yeah, that's way out of line." The crowd shook their heads, whispers spreading between patrons. But the woman, seemingly unfazed, didn't retreat. If anything, the growing disapproval only seemed to fuel her. "I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking," she snapped, her voice rising in defiance. Someone had to say it. Derrick's voice cut through the tension, steady but laced with quiet intensity. "And you thought it should be you?" he asked. His words were measured, his calm demeanor holding firm as a shield. The woman blinked, momentarily thrown off by his unshakable composure. "What's that supposed to mean?" she shot back, her tone now defensive. Derrick didn't flinch. "It means you've just shown everyone here exactly who you are," he replied, gesturing broadly to the room. "Look at their faces. You didn't say what they're thinking. You said what you're thinking. And now they know it." The weight of his words lingered in the room, a direct counterbalance to the woman's venom. But this was just the beginning. Derrick's next words would not only silence the woman but change the very air in the cafe. He spoke with a quiet strength that carried far beyond just the woman. His words seemed to reverberate through the walls, touching everyone in the room. "Do you know what that word means to someone like me?" Derrick continued, his voice unwavering. "What it carries. It's not just a slur, it's a reminder. A reminder of the pain, the struggle, the history of people who look like me. People who've endured far worse than this moment and kept moving forward, holding their heads high." The cafe seemed to hold its breath. Even the hum of the espresso machine seemed to pause, as if caught in the gravity of his words. Every eye in the room was fixed on Derrick as he took the moment, his calm grace demanding attention. He turned his gaze back to the woman, his tone unyielding but not cruel. "You think you're putting me in my place, but the truth is, you're showing everyone here exactly where you've decided to stand, and that's on the wrong side of decency. The wrong side of humanity." The woman opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her defiance faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Derrick didn't wait for her to find her footing. His voice rose, just slightly, as he gestured toward the people around them. "These people, they're witnesses. Witnesses to your hate, but also to something more powerful, what I choose to do next. And I'm choosing not to meet your hate with more hate. Because that's not who I am. I've seen too much, lived too much, to let someone like you dictate my reaction." A soft murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The man who had spoken up earlier nodded, his face showing admiration. The barista, who had been watching from behind the counter, stepped forward, her expression firm with resolve. "Sir," she said, addressing Derrick. "Your coffee is on the house." She then turned to the woman. "And as for you," she added, "you need to leave." The woman's face turned crimson, and she snapped, "I'm not going anywhere." Her voice, though still defiant, lacked the bite it had moments ago. "I've done nothing wrong." Derrick raised a hand, signaling for the barista to pause. "Let her stay," he said calmly. "Let her hear this." Turning back to the woman, he softened his tone slightly, though it still carried the weight of his convictions. "I don't know what led you to this moment," he said, his voice unwavering. "What pain or fear made you think this was okay? But I hope you take some time to think about what happened here today. Because whether you realize it or not, you've left an impression on everyone in this room. And it's not the one you think." The woman's mouth opened, then closed again. Her gaze flickered nervously around the room, meeting only judgment and disapproval. Slowly, her bravado crumbled, and she turned, walking toward the door. As she left, the first clap sounded, then another, and soon the entire cafe was applauding, not for her departure, but for Derrick's quiet dignity and strength. The sound of applause filled the space, a collective acknowledgement of his victory. But Derrick wasn't finished. As the door swung shut behind the woman, he turned to face the room, his words still carrying. The applause began to subside, but Derrick held the moment, allowing the silence to settle. He glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of the patrons who had witnessed the exchange. Their expressions were a mixture of admiration, gratitude, and quiet reflection. Derrick took a breath, letting the weight of the moment settle before he spoke again. "I'm not here to make a scene," he began, his voice steady and calm. "But I think we all need to acknowledge something. Hate doesn't grow in a vacuum. It thrives in silence. In indifference. Moments like this aren't just opportunities for me to stand up for myself, they're opportunities for all of us." The barista stood firm, arms crossed, a silent witness to the lingering tension in the air. Her face was a mask of resolve as she nodded. "You're right," she said, her voice steady, cutting through the last remnants of discomfort. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry you had to deal with that here." Derrick, sensing the sincerity in her words, gave her a small smile. His eyes softened, but there was a quiet strength in his gaze. "It's not about this cafe," he said, his voice clear, "it's about what we do next. How we respond. Not just now, but in every moment after this. Every time we see something like this happen again." The young woman near the window shifted in her seat, her hand rising hesitantly, almost as if asking permission to speak. I just want to say thank you," she stammered, her voice fragile but filled with gratitude. "For handling that the way you did. I don't think I would have been as calm, or as brave." Derrick's smile deepened, warmth creeping into his expression. "Bravery isn't about not feeling anger or hurt," he explained, his words measured, each one dropping like a stone into still water, creating ripples of understanding. "It's about choosing what to do with those feelings. We all have that choice." The man who had spoken up earlier added his voice, this time a tone of respect threading through his words. "And you made the right one," he said, his gaze unwavering. "That took strength, man. Real strength." The atmosphere in the cafe shifted, like the changing tide of the ocean, the initial tension now replaced with something else, a sense of connection, a quiet unity. Conversations resumed, but they weren't just about coffee or casual pleasantries anymore. People began sharing their own stories, of standing up to injustice, of moments when they wished they'd acted differently, of times they had failed but vowed never to again. The room hummed with energy, an energy that felt rare, almost electric, like something transformative had taken root. As Derrick collected his coffee, the barista handed him a second cup, her eyes glinting with something like respect. "For being the kind of person we need more of in this world," she said with a wink. Derrick chuckled softly, accepting the gesture with a nod. "Thank you," he said, "but remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about showing up when it matters." When Derrick stepped out of the cafe, the morning sunlight struck him like a blessing. The world felt just a little lighter, the air just a little clearer. But as the door swung shut behind him, he carried the weight of the lessons learned within that small cafe. The exchange had been intense, yes, but regret? There was none. Instead, a sense of purpose filled him. He knew that these moments weren't just about standing up for himself, they were about creating ripples, challenging others to think, to act, and to grow. He paused for a brief moment, letting the crisp morning air fill his lungs, feeling it sweep away the remnants of the confrontation. He glanced down at the coffee cup in his hand, the warmth from it seeping through the cardboard sleeve. A memory stirred, one he hadn't thought about in years. His late grandmother's voice echoed in his mind, "Kindness isn't weakness. It's power. It takes strength to choose it." Her words had been his guiding light through so many difficult moments. And today, just like every other day, they had stared him true. He turned and caught his reflection in the cafe's glass window, briefly confronting the image of himself standing there. For a fleeting second, his thoughts drifted back to the woman, the anger in her eyes, the ignorance that clouded her mind. But beneath it all, he could sense something else, the pain she carried, the hurt that perhaps even she refused to acknowledge. He knew better than to believe his words had changed her, but maybe, just maybe, they'd planted a seed. Inside, the cafe patrons were still talking, their voices no longer heavy with judgment but buzzing with a different energy. Derrick didn't need to hear their words to know what they were discussing. The story of what had happened there would leave the cafe, travel beyond those walls, inspiring some, challenging others. It was a quiet reminder that change didn't require grand gestures. Sometimes, it was as simple as standing up, speaking the truth, and walking away from hate. Before leaving, Derrick took one last look at the cafe. He didn't need to stay to see the impact of his actions. He had already done what he came to do. To stand tall, to speak clearly, and to remind everyone, including himself, that dignity could never be taken, only surrendered. As he walked away, the lessons of the day lingered with him, but so did something more profound, the knowledge that he had made a difference, no matter how small, no matter how brief. Stories like these remind us all of the strength it takes to respond to hate with grace, to stand firm in our values when it's hardest, and to speak up when it matters most. If you found yourself moved by this story, take a moment to reflect on how you can make a difference in your own community. And if you believe in spreading messages of resilience and humanity, share this story with those around you. Together, let's keep the conversation going, one story at a time.